Today marked the third day of hearings for the House Select Committee and its investigation into January 6th. The hearing mostly focused on two main themes. In this case, John Eastman, Donald Trump's lawyer, and his bogus political theories to essentially overturn the results of the election or pave the way for Vice President Mike Pence to unilaterally decide to hand the election over to Donald Trump. And then the other part was Trump's pressure campaign toward Vice President Mike Pence and how that led to violence toward Pence, incitements of violence toward Pence. And we'll get to that in just a bit. But before we do, let's focus on the John Eastman portion of it, where they basically made a case, a fascinating case, that John Eastman himself was aware that his own political theory, which was that they could use an alternate, bogus, fake slate of electors. He knew that that was not something that was protected under the Constitution or something that they could do. And I want to start off with a video featuring White House lawyer and Better Call Saul lookalike Howard Hamlin lookalike Eric Hirschman. I think he's kind of been a little bit of a star within these hearings because of how blunt he is in his communications. But here he is making the point about what everyone around John Eastman was telling John Eastman about his political theory. Let's watch.
I said to him, hold on a second, I want to understand what you're saying. You're saying that you believe the vice president, acting as president of the Senate, can be the sole decision maker as to, under your theory, who becomes the next president of the United States? And he said yes. I said, are you out of your effing mind? Right, and that was pretty blunt. I said, you're completely crazy.
You're out of your mind, you're completely crazy. This wasn't the first time it was communicated to John Eastman that using an alternate slate of electors was insane. There are other examples which we'll show you in just a minute. But Cenk, I know that you have taken a particular liking to his communicative style.
Yeah, no, I look, remember he's a White House lawyer in a Republican administration. So I'm sure that I would not agree with him probably on at least 80% of stuff. But having said that, he's been fantastic in these recorded pieces because he's just being honest. And he's like, look, I don't care. I'm an American and I'm not gonna destroy democracy for you guys. You guys are crazy and as you'll see later, he's like, you better have a good criminal defense lawyer, man, because this is illegal and it's unconstitutional. And I want you to notice the bat in the background when he's testifying. It's a bat on the wall that just says justice on it.
So he must really mean it.
Yeah, so I love that touch to it. But guys, like Eastman's coming up with the unique theory that one person can invalidate the votes of hundreds of millions of Americans and make democracy irrelevant, right? So that's an absurd theory. But remember, John Yoo also had an absurd theory under the Bush administration that torture, which is illegal, was actually secretly legal and you could torture anyone you like. John Yoo, I saw him last night on CNN. They normalize everything. So Eastman should go to jail for sure. As you're gonna see here, he knows he's about that he would go to jail in a normal circumstance. He knows it, you're gonna see the facts. But you know what, you never know. CNN might normalize him and make him a legal analyst later.
I honestly, I wouldn't put it past them. They've turned all sorts of unsavory, shady individuals within the Trump administration into contributors of theirs. Now, there are a lot of important and serious points to make. Cenk has already made some of them. I'm in a little bit of a lighter mood, unfortunately, I guess, considering the subject matter. But you see it too, right? He looks like the character from Better Call Saul.
A little bit, I see that a little bit. I mainly saw during the hearings the frown ladies. The one lady in the background that had such a significant frown that there were lines in her face. When she smiled, it was still in the shape of a frown. So don't get me wrong, I notice everything, okay?
All right, I'm just saying, I mean, we've got evidence for you guys. You can judge for yourselves. So okay. Here's Howard Hamlin from Better Call Saul. Lawyer, a literal lawyer who also has bleached blonde hair. Okay. And then here's the White House counsel. Just saying, okay, just saying. You guys do what you will with that information, okay? Now let's move on. Email exchanges indicated that Eastman, in fact, knew that his theory was crazy. Let's take a look at that.
Here, Dr. Eastman says the vice president can reject the Biden electors from the states that he calls, quote, disputed. Under several of the scenarios, the vice president could ultimately just declare Donald Trump the winner, regardless of the vote totals that had already been certified by the states. However, this was false, and Dr. Eastman knew it was false. In other words, it was a lie. In fact, on December 19th, 2020, just 4 days before Dr. Eastman sent this memo, Dr. Eastman himself admitted in an email that the fake electors had no legal weight.
No legal weight. And the House Select Committee also did a fantastic job in demonstrating that Eastman did in fact know that this theory was bogus, that he would not like if this idea had been practiced by other administrations, but he said, nah, we should go through with it anyway. In fact, here's that moment from the hearing.
John, back in 2000, you weren't jumping up and saying Al Gore had this authority to do that. You would not want Kamala Harris to be able to exercise that kind of authority in 2024 when I hope Republicans will win the election, and I know you hope that too, John. And he said, absolutely. Al Gore did not have a basis to do it in 2000. Kamala Harris shouldn't be able to do it in 2024, but I think you should do it today.
I think you should do it today. No, I mean, I wouldn't want Kamala Harris to do it. But look, that point, let me just note, that point is kind of moot, right? Because that's what would happen in the future. But had the Trump administration, had Pence gone through with what Trump wanted, look, it was a power grab. And the idea was, let's just try it. And if it works, like all the other, terrible, questionable, unconstitutional things that Trump has done and has not been in any way held accountable for, well, then we're in power. And if they're in power, they could be in power indefinitely. It's a power grab with no consequences paid at all for that power grab, right? So Kamala Harris would never even get the opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, so there's 2 points on Kamala Harris. One is the one that I honestly have been making for a year and a half on the shows you guys have seen. I'm like, why don't they just say, if their theory is true, Kamala Harris can decide the next election unilaterally. You don't even have to bother voting. The vice president decides every election, according to John Eastman and Donald Trump. Donald Trump is patient zero who pushed this theory and demanded that Pence do this wildly illegal and unconstitutional thing. And so finally they said it a year and a half into it. And when it was so cathartic when they mentioned Kamala Harris, and we should be asking Republicans, is that what you want? Because if you think Trump's theory was right, Kamala Harris decides the next election. So which one is it? Which one is it? Is Trump full of crap? Is what he did illegal? Or can Kamala Harris decide the next election by herself? And Anna's absolutely right about the second point, which is that Eastman didn't think there was going to be a next election.
Exactly.
It's like, just do it now. Not only won't we have Kamala Harris as vice president if we just grab power, we'll never have to worry about another Kamala Harris, because then we just killed all elections. It doesn't matter how you vote. We will be in charge in perpetuity because the vice president goes out every time and goes, no, we won. No, we won, right? So this is not a little thing and this is not political. There was actually a coup attempt in America. You're living in what history books are going to talk about. And what is amazing about it is, right after, and the historians will be shocked, they're not gonna be able to believe it. Right after the coup attempt, everyone started debating it like it was 50-50.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. That's a really good point. And look, I think your analysis on this is right on the money. And what's even more terrifying about it is that our line of defense were all of these right-wing ideologues surrounding Donald Trump. That these are the people, these right-wing White House lawyers, even members of Trump's own family, Sean Hannity. These were individuals who served as our line of defense, which is terrifying considering the track record these individuals have. Now, one other thing that stood out to me about the hearing was the fact that all these people surrounding Donald Trump, surrounding John Eastman, privately knew the political strategy was bogus, was not in any way protected by the Constitution, but publicly they said something very different. In fact, Jason Miller himself admitted that during his testimony during this investigation. Another individual was actually Rudy Giuliani. He knew the fake elector theory was BS, but he promoted it on January 6th during his speech. Let's watch.
Morning of January 6th, I think he called me out of the blue, right? And I was like getting dressed. And we had an intellectual discussion about Eastman's, I don't know if it's Eastman's theory per se, but the VP's role. And he was asking me my view and analysis and then the practical implications of it. And when we finished, he said, like, I believe that, you're probably right.
Of course, the fact that Mayor Giuliani seemed to admit that the theory was wrong did not stop him from going before the crowd just a few hours later on January 6th and saying the exact opposite. Here's Mayor Giuliani's speech at the Ellipse rally on January 6th.
Every single thing that has been outlined as the plan for today is perfectly legal. I have Professor Eastman here with me to say a few words about that. Given the questionable constitutionality of the Election Counting Act of 1887, that the vice president can cast it aside and he can do what a president called Jefferson did when he was vice president.
So again, privately, Giuliani acknowledged that what Eastman was saying was bogus. Publicly, he obviously publicized it, he promoted it, and this is what's really important. That speech was on January 6th. That is communicating to the crowd that what they're about to engage in is totally fine. They're protecting constitutional rights here.
Yeah, so first of all, of course, Thomas Jefferson never did that. It was a total lie. They explained that in the hearings. Second of all, there's another guy, Jason Miller, that Anna referred to, that did the same exact thing as Giuliani in private. And in fact, in his testimony, when he's talking to the lawyers, and he's got that mask on, he tells them, "Oh, we knew that our strategy was nutty." That's a quote, and like that people were calling it nutty, and that it was crazy. So he knows. And then you see him on Fox News, and he's like, "Oh, we got to do this," and the vice president has the authority, and no, they're going for the steal. Right, and so they had decided a core group. Remember, there was Team Normal, his campaign manager, the White House lawyers, etc., that are going, "Oh, you guys are nuts. The 12th Amendment does not say any of the things that you guys claim it says. It says all you're supposed to do is count the certified votes from the elections. You guys are totally making this up. And by the way, there's no fraud in the elections at all. We checked all of your kooky evidence. There's no there's nothing, okay? But there's a core group of Team Cuckoo, Jason Miller, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, a guy named Cheesebro. He just came out of nowhere. It's like Wayne Grove from Heat. Like they just have like the strangest cast of characters. Anyways, Team Cuckoo is like, "Oh yeah, we all know we're crazy and we all know it's a lie, but let's just go out there and say it anyway and let's end democracy, be done with it, we'll be in charge forever." So look, one last thing, John Eastman, how do we know that he knew? He asked for a pardon right afterwards.
Yes. So that was part of the testimony that was given by the White House counsel, Eric Hirschman. He said that on January 7th, he received a call from John Eastman. And in that call, John Eastman essentially asked for advice. That's when Eric Hirschman told him, "You better get a good effing criminal defense attorney. You're in a lot of trouble." I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he testified he told Eastman. And then Eastman asked whether he could get on the pardon list.
I mean, again, it reminds you of Breaking Bad. You don't need a criminal lawyer, you need a criminal lawyer, okay? And that's what John Eastman was in the first place. Now, here's a second giant piece of evidence. So when he was asked to testify here in front of the lawyers, like you see in all the tapes they're playing, John Eastman pled the Fifth 100 times.
That's right.
You know what the Fifth Amendment is? Saying I have a right not to incriminate myself. So he knows he's guilty. He's saying, "Oh, I know, if I told you, if I was honest with you, I would obviously incriminate myself because we did it. That's why I asked for the pardon, because I knew it was a crime." That is what his actions are screaming clearly and loudly. And still, by the way, you see all those Republican experts, almost everybody they're talking to is Republican. Part of it is to give you a sense, this is not a partisan witch hunt or any nonsense like that. There's actual Republicans who care, but mainly they're trying to convince Republican voters, you're not supposed to kill democracy. You're not supposed to do a violent coup in America. You're supposed to, when you lose an election, you're supposed to go, sad day, we'll get them next time. And you're supposed to do an orderly transition. That same Hirschman made Eastman say the day after, say the words orderly transition, say it. And he wouldn't let him off the phone until he said, okay, we'll do an orderly transition. And then Hirschman hung up on him.
Justice.